Hello everyone and welcome back to this continued solutions lecture of the Capstone Project 1. We're going to continue right where we left off last time and finish the project by just editing the CSS file to make the styling look the same as to what we wanted the Capstone Project 1 to look like. Let's jump to the editor and browser and get started. Okay, so here I am at my editor. What I'm first going to do is edit the main things in the body that I want to change. We've already taken care of the font family. The next thing I want to do is take care of the background color. So remember, the background color was actually a dark background. So I'll allow you to choose just any color you want that's dark, or any light color. It doesn't really matter. That's not really the point of this exercise. The background color that I ended up choosing was hex code 011627. And because we have a dark background color, it means the actual color of our text, which we can call by just color, needs to be a lighter color, or it can just be white or cream. So I choose hex code FDFFFC colon. So let's make sure that worked out. We'll refresh this page. Great. So here we can see we're back to the dark blue and now the white text. Next thing I want to do is actually align everything to be centered. So I will say text align center. Refresh, make sure that works. Everything's looking great there. Now let's work with that border. So the border is actually going to be quite thick. The official solutions have it at 60 pixels, but I'm a little zoomed in here. So let's just do something like 40 pixels. And let's make it a solid border. And here we can actually use a hex code again. And the hex code I did was a teal color. So we said 2EC486. Again, don't worry if your colors don't match exactly. You really have all the flexibility you want as far as the colors go. But here we have the border looking good. But remember that we also wanted to get rid of this top border, which means I can just say border top and assign it to be 0 pixels. And that's a very quick way for us to essentially get rid of that top border and leave it to be that background color. And then finally, if I want to make the call even closer, I can call something like margin to be 0 pixels to try to slim down the distance between the border and the actual edge. So again, if I comment that out and refresh this, I can see there's a little bit of gap between the border and the edge of the browser there. If I undo that to give it a 0 pixel margin, then I squeeze all the way to the end. Okay, so now let's take care of some of the individual elements. So the paragraph, we already have that color working correctly because it's in the body. What we might want to do is add a little more padding. So let's just practice doing that. I'm going to say padding on the top is something like 5%. Padding on the left, we can say 20%. And we can say padding on the right is 20%. So we can save that and refresh over here. And now it's been able to kind of elongate the landing page for us. So it looks a little more like the solutions. And then finally, we also want to start editing some of the sizes here. So if you look here on the first name, last name, email, and the form in general, things are looking a little smaller than, or actually the same size as the paragraph, but we want them to be a little larger. So they're looking a little smaller in reference to the solution. So let's expand that. Something I can do is try calling form and say everything in the form tag has a font size and call it with EM. So it's in relationship to everything else, to the body text. So if I refresh this, now we're looking at a much larger font size here. And if I don't like the spacing here, I can also add a margin. So I can say something like margin, or I could even just give it to the bottom and give it a small margin, like something like 10 pixels. And again, this is really up to you. This is just so that border doesn't touch that bottom button. And now let's talk about that bottom button. Remember, we gave that bottom button an ID called sub, so I can say hashtag sub. And let's give it a colored background. So we'll say background color, and the solutions lecture was gold, so that's what we'll just give it. In my case, the hex code I found was FF9F1C. Let's refresh this, make sure it worked. Looks like it's gold now. Now let's make it much larger. So let's add in a height. We'll say about 80 pixels. And we'll also give it a width of, let's make it a little larger, something like 150 pixels. Save this, refresh. Okay, it's looking pretty large now. Let's continue. Let's give it a bit of a margin so it's not directly touching that email. And we'll give it something like a 4 pixel margin there. Looks a little nicer since it's not directly touching. And if we wanted, we can make the top margin a little better. So we'll say something like, 4 pixels. Something like margin top. Let's specifically give that to be, let's say triple that, 10 pixels. So we refresh and it looks a little nicer in the spacing here. Great. Now finally, a couple things we wanted to do is the font size is a little small. So I'll call font size again, say 1.5 EM. And I also want to show you the trick for curving the button. So right now by default the button is square. If I want to give it some curve, the term for that is border radius. And then we can define a certain amount of pixels that we want the radius border to have, which will basically just round the corner. So if I refresh this, I can see it says sign me. And right now the font is a little too big. So what we can do is actually just call it back to, let's say 1 EM. See if that fixes it. Sign me up. Okay, that's looking good. So our actual font size is okay. And it looks like everything is working. So let's try this now. We'll say hello, first name, fill in the last name, give some email, click on sign me up, and it takes me to thank you for signing up. So we're able to just quickly walk through an example landing page. Obviously it doesn't do much. This was more just for you to practice looking at something and then recreating it. And so far, looks pretty good. Feel free to play around with it a lot more. Feel free to explore the official solutions that I've left for you in the downloaded folder. They're a little different than what we went through here, but basically the same idea. Okay, if you have any questions, feel free to post to the Q&A forums, and I'll be happy to help you out. I'll see you at the next lecture.